hot topic of the hour. President Trump will sit down with Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea in just 2 weeks as tariff tensions are escalating between the two countries. The president admitting to Maria the 157% tariff is not sustainable. He commented from the White House yesterday. Watch this.
I'm going to see President Xi in 2 weeks. I'm going over to South Korea. They want to discuss the fact that they're paying 157% tariff. It's a little higher than they thought. And we're doing very well. I think we're going to do well in that negotiation. We've done well, as you know, with Japan, with South Korea, with Europe. The European nations got together. We made a deal. And it was all based without the tariffs. You could have never made the deal. I'll tell you what, tariffs equal national security. Remember that. Tariffs equal national security. You got to remember that. And they also equal wealth for our nation.
And tariff revenues are surging. Total revenue for fiscal year 2025 skyrocketing to more than $215 billion. According to the Treasury Department, those numbers just published. This is also ahead of the Supreme Court showdown on November 5th. The court is going to decide if President Trump's tariffs are constitutional. Now, the president may attend the hearing. That would mark the first time a sitting president has witnessed Supreme Court proceedings in person. Maria sat down with the president. She asked him about trade, record-breaking U.S. investment, and whether he has a tariff backup plan should the court rule against him. Watch.
It could be $20 trillion by the end of the first year, my first year.
Investment in America.
Investing in America, $20 trillion. No country's ever done anywhere even near that, like a fraction of that. Biden did less than $1 trillion in 4 years. I did 20 trillion. We're going to do over 17 trillion in 8 months. By the time we end, we could do over 20 trillion. And a big part of that are the tariffs, because they don't want to have to pay the tariffs, because it's so unsustainable that they come and build the pharmaceuticals and the chips and all of the things. They're coming into the United States and they're building them. It's a miracle what's happening.
What is your backup plan should the Supreme Court decision go against you on the tariffs and the emergency
Well, I'll have to figure something out. I don't want to even think about it. We're doing so well to think about it. You know, if that happened, we'd have to pay back money. So if anything would happen with that, that would mean they're allowed to use tariffs and we're not. If they took away, this is national security, if they took away tariffs, then they've taken away our national security.
National security and a lot of income for the federal government. Just in August and September alone, Luke, we collected back-to-back record-breaking revenues. That was just $62.6 billion in 2 months.
Well, what I find interesting is you just said $215 billion in tariff revenue on that shot there. We're on track for almost $300 billion, call it probably, for the end of this year. Yeah. That's basically on par with last year's deficit with China, the $300 billion trade deficit we had. And Trump actually hit the nail on the head. There's a bigger plan that he has with this. You know, when it comes to getting international countries to invest in America, what that does is drives the U.S. dollar up. That strengthens the U.S. dollar that's been very weak so far this year. We need the U.S. dollar to remain strong, and a couple reasons for that. One of the reasons I think Trump administration's all for is to get interest rates lower. You mentioned the 10-year Treasury at below 4%. Yeah, if that goes lower, that's actually better for middle-class America. So there's a longer-term game plan here. It's not just about trade revenue. It's not just about national security. That's a big part, but it's also for the long-term strength of the U.S. dollar while China is trying to get other countries to trade in the yuan.
Yeah,
very interesting thing there.
And we knew, Tiana, there was going to be short-term pain for long-term gain, and that is, of course, getting manufacturing supply chains back into the United States, which he has been. Yeah. I mean, this deal with Australia on Monday was pretty incredible. But I have to ask you, picture the president at the Supreme Court. That would be something.
Yes, it will be something. And Trump is correct that there is the issue with if you have, you know, a new $200 billion hole in the federal budget because you need to pay that back, then all of a sudden the tariffs go from being an asset on the federal balance sheet into this massive liability. And look, I'm not so confident in the idea that the tariffs are succeeding in national security. The dollar's down 9% on the year. However, what they massively have succeeded at is at minimizing the only deficit that really matters, which is the federal budget deficit, which came in 4% lower in fiscal year 2025 than fiscal year 2024. And that is at least a third of that was because of these tariffs. Are they succeeding in bringing jobs back? Not really, right? Manufacturing employment is down, what, 40,000 jobs? However, I think we saw the beginning of the strategy that should be at play here with that Australia meeting with Prime Minister Albanese on Monday, which is work with our allies, give them favorable trade conditions, right? We only have 10% tariff on Australia, to ice out the Chinese, right? Trump says he's not scared about China invading Taiwan. That's belied by the fact that we're correctly expediting nuclear submarines. That is what we want to do. Embrace our allies to help them ice out the Chinese.
There's also, and this goes to the issue of Argentina and why we're putting support behind Argentina. Again, a move to ice out the Chinese, to borrow your phrase right there. We do have some breaking news this morning. This is coming from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. He just posted moments ago on X this. President Trump is taking control of unwieldy government spending to get the U.S. fiscal house in order. In response, financial markets have cheered the president's accomplishments with benchmark Treasury yields making new intra-year lows. The 10-year, which we referenced at the top of the show, Luke.
Well, that's exactly just goes with my point I brought up a few seconds ago. If I said this actually a few months ago, actually probably 9 months ago now at this point, when Scott Bessent was basically in talks with being named Treasury, their sole goal, if I had to pick Scott Bessent's sole goal, it's to get the 10-year Treasury lower. Because again, we live in this debt Ponzi scheme. The only way the Ponzi can continue to run is for interest rates to go lower. And that's beneficial for smaller cap companies, beneficial for those tech companies that need to borrow money to grow. It's beneficial for the AI revolution. I mean, it's so important for that 10-year to get lower, and it's happening.
And it affects everything from mortgage rates to loans. I mean, the 10-year is really the story. And this is the relief that the American consumer, in particular the housing market, really has been looking for. So there you go.